Hello, and welcome to today's video on Introduction to Open Spacing. At this point, if you've not watched the previous videos on triad quality and triad inversion, I recommend that you watch those videos now, as it will help you to understand the upcoming lesson. Up until this point, we've only been looking at chords that have been built using 3 notes and chords that have been spaced as closely together as possible. In this video, we are going to look at introducing a 4th note and see what happens when we begin to space these notes further apart. We will start by examining a C major chord. The C major chord is built up of the root, which is a C, the 3rd, which is an E, and the 5th, which is a G. If we want to introduce a 4th note, our options are to pick one of the remaining notes, or to double a note that we have already used in a different octave. For now, we are going to stick with doubling notes. In this example, we are going to take the root of the chord, which is a C, and double it an octave higher. Doubling a note does not affect the quality of the chord. We are still dealing with a C major chord. Doubling a note can affect the inversion. However, in this example, the root is still the bottom note, meaning that we are in root position. In this example, we are still looking at a C major chord, but now it is in first inversion as the 3rd is the bottom note. If we take the 3rd, which is an E in this example, and move it up an octave, we are still left with a C major chord, as it still has the notes C, E, and G, and it is still in first position because the 3rd is still the lowest note. When you are looking at a chord, it is possible that either the root, the 3rd, or the 5th has been doubled. However, traditional voice leading rules advise against doubling the 3rd. So what now if we take those 4 notes and begin to space them out more? In the first example here, instead of doubling the root or the C up the octave, we have doubled the note down an octave and placed it in the bass clef. It is important to note that the spacing of the notes does not affect the quality of the chord or the inversion of the chord. This is still C major chord as it contains the notes C, E, and G, and the root or the C is still the lowest note, so it is still in root position. This next example begins to move some of the other notes to different octaves, making the spacing between the notes even greater. A close examination shows us that we still have the root or a C, which has been doubled, the 3rd or an E, and the 5th, which is a G. The next 2 examples also contain the same notes, the root or the C, which has been doubled, the 3rd, which is an E, and the 5th, which is a G. However, the fundamental difference between these 2 is the note that is on the bottom. In one case, we have the E or the 3rd on the bottom, making it a first inversion chord, and in the other example, we have a G or the 5th on the bottom, making it a second inversion chord. When dealing with chords, close spacing means that the top 3 notes, or the soprano, alto, and tenor notes, are as close together as they possibly can, with no room between them to fit another chord note in. The first example here would then be in close position, as there is no room to fit a note between the top 3 notes. Open spacing then means that the top 3 notes, or the soprano, alto, and tenor notes, have been spaced widely enough that you can fit another chord note in between either the soprano and alto notes or between the alto and tenor notes. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th examples on this slide demonstrate examples of chords that are in open spacing. We can then look at identifying chords that are in open spacing as a 2-step process. The first step being to identify the different notes in the chord to determine the quality of the chord. If you are new to this, I would initially recommend taking the notes that are present in the chord and writing them out as a root position triad. This looks like the snowman shape that we looked at in previous videos, where the 3 notes are either on all lines or on all spaces and are as close together as they possibly can be, ensuring that the root is on the bottom. This will help you identify the quality of the chord as you are getting started. The second step is to identify which note is the bass note or lowest note in the chord, whether it is the root, the 3rd, or the fifth. This will help you determine what inversion the chord is in. We are now going to take our 2 steps towards identifying chords in open position and apply them to some examples. Looking at the first example here, our first step is to identify the different pitches in the chord to determine the quality of it. If we take the 3 pitches, in this case we see that there's a D, there's an F sharp, and an A. And if we rearrange them so that we create our root position triad, where we are using either all lines or all spaces, and again it looks kind of like that snowman, we can use this shape to help us determine what quality of chord we're looking at. Using our knowledge of scales and intervals, we can tell that the distance between the D, in this case the root, to the F sharp is a major third. We can then build up from the D, or the root, going up to the A, and determine that that is a perfect fifth. That means we are looking at a major chord, and since chords take their name from the root, this means that this is a D major chord. Our second step is to look at what note is in the bass line of the chord. In this case, the bass note or lowest note is a D, which is our root. Therefore, we are looking at a chord that is a D major chord in root position. Sometimes, again, this is marked with the numbers 5, 3. With the second example, the first step is again taking the different pitches. In this case, we have an A, a C, and an E, and rewriting them into that root position triad to help us identify the quality of it. In this case, we have from the root, which is an A, to the C, a minor third, and from the root up to the E, a perfect fifth. With our knowledge of triad qualities, we know that that is a minor triad. Our second step is to look at the bass note in the chord to tell us what the inversion is. In this case, the bass note is a C. And since the C is the third, that means we are looking at a first inversion chord. However, the name of the chord takes its name from the root. So the chord we are looking at is an A minor chord in first inversion. Remember that first inversion can sometimes be marked using the numbers 6, 3, or even sometimes just 6 as a short form. With our next example, we begin by writing the different notes of the chord, in this case a B, a D, and an F, out in our root position triad. Using our knowledge of intervals, we can tell that from the root to the third it is a minor third, and from the root to the fifth it is a diminished fifth. That means we are looking at a diminished chord. Our second step is to identify the bass note. In this case, the bass note is an F, which is the fifth. Therefore, we are looking at a chord that is in second inversion. Second inversion is sometimes marked with the numbers 6, 4. The chord itself takes its name from the root, so we are looking at a B diminished chord in second inversion. With our final example, we begin again by writing out the different chord notes, in this case a G, a B, and a D sharp, in the root position triad. From the root to the third, or from the G to the B, we have a major third. From the G to the D sharp, we have an augmented fifth. That means we are looking at an augmented chord. Looking at the bass note, we can see that it is a G, and in this case, that is the root. That means that this is a root position chord. As the root is a G, we are looking at a G augmented chord in root position.